countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Live from the laboratories of Niles Calder, it is now time for more of the Last Comic Shop!
I thought we weren't doing that live stuff anymore.
I have to do it sometimes. I get bored. Do you not want me to bring the energy every single week? That's what the newbies want, right, J.A.?
Because we're opening up the shop to help them find their way underneath the comic book tent.
And leaving the door unlocked so all of you old guys can come in here and swipe all those things you were into. Those back issues of...
Paw through the short boxes.
That's right.
When it's done respectfully, it's called rummaging.
That's right. Right? That's right.
Oftentimes, they just come in to use the bathroom. Their bladders are so small. Anyways.
Let's not alienate our audience.
True.
Chad's not here, and I misbehave because I don't know his script. I don't know it.
That is true. Chad is on vacation this week, but I am the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by my regular co-host, J.A. Scott, as well as two wonderful guests. Folks that, gosh, if we had the room, we'd have on the Last Comic Shop every single week. That's Mikey Wood and George from Short Box Summary. Yay!
Hooray for us.
We did it. Good job, Mikey.
Yay!
And if you're wondering what we're reading this week, it is not a Marvel book. We wrapped up the Merry Marvel March Society last week with Maximum Carnage. Hope everybody, I'm not going to say enjoyed that, but
enjoyed the podcast. Hope you enjoyed the podcast, not necessarily the book that was read on the podcast.
I cannot imagine.
Well, we're hoping that you enjoy this week's book. It is The Unstoppable Doom Patrol. That 7-issue series that came out last year. Long story short, though, it is out in trade today. So if you're enjoying today's episode and you want to go buy your local comic book shop and pick it up in trade, make sure that you do that thing.
And first, listen to the wonderful interview we did with Dennis Culver, the writer of this series.
That's right. Look at you.
Ago.
I went for a walk today and I listened to that as homework for this episode. I wanted to get back into that feeling. Got to be honest, you guys, I have never read a Doom Patrol comic before this comic.
Okay.
They are such a blind spot for me.
This was an accessible Doom, I think.
Incredibly. I can't wait to talk about it. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of hearing George talk, if you're a frequent listener to his podcast, which you should be, that's Short Box Summary, you'll know that oftentimes George likes to put social context behind the comic books that he's reading, meaning like he likes to talk about the movies and the TV shows and the music that's released around the same time as certain comic book he's reading on his show. All of those that may listen, you'll know that most of his comic books are from the mid-2000s, so it is kind of like a blast from the past. This book was released last year. I don't know how much of a blast from the past it's going to be, but we're still going to do it. George, why don't you take it away?
This book came out May 2023. I'm going to start with music because I've got the list of everything that was bumping. I have here the Billboard Hot 100 for May 20th, 2023. This is the oldest I've ever felt doing this segment on a podcast before because I don't know any of these songs. Song number 1, Last Night by Morgan Wallen. Song number 2, Kill Bill by SZA. I actually do know that one. I take it back. Song number 3, Flowers by Miley Cyrus. Song number 4, Ella Baila Sola by Esteban Armado. Cross Peso Pluma. That's me. You can tell I'm half Chilean because I pronounce those words correctly. And song number 5 was Calm Down by Rima and Selena Gomez. If you had a gun to my head and said, like, I'll give you $10 million if you could just hum the tune to one of these songs, I couldn't do it. So we're going to move on from music, and we're going to go straight into movies.
You don't know the Flowers song? I would buy myself flowers. My kids walk my way.
No, because that doesn't sound like a 2023 song. That sounds like a 70s song. Like, that feels out of place. And so, yes, that one does. Let's move on to movies. Let's talk about the domestic box office for May 2023. Movie number 1. I'm pretty sure you recorded an episode about this. I feel like I remembered listening to it. Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 3.
Yeah.
Had a domestic gross of $310 million, plus some change. Movie number 2, The Little Mermaid, the live-action remake from Disney, Movie number 3, Fast X. I gotta be honest, I fell off Fast X probably around the 7 or 8s. I can't quite remember.
Really? Any reason why?
They're terrible.
No, Fast 5 is in contention for best action movie of the decade. Like, I feel like they got their second wind.
It peaked at Fast 5, and
then they were like, what if we like made this like an interconnected universe between all the movies? And it's like, oh, that kind of sounds like homework.
Yeah.
And like that was kind of my dropping point, which is weird because I'm pretty sure that's when they introduced Charlize Theron and Helen Mirren, who were two pretty important women, especially to teenage George.
I do have a comment. Did you know that the plot of Fast and Furious #1 is about stealing DVD players?
I do remember that. And did you know that it is almost beat for beat the exact same movie as Point Break, where instead of robbing banks, they're robbing DVD players from trucks, but it is almost the entirely same movie, which is why Point Break is such a good, timeless movie. They proved it by remaking it 9 years later.
where is the scene with Paul Walker on the sand shooting the gun into the air? The plot is totally the same, but
you're
one
right.
is
one has way more heart. Thank you so much for all the tenderness in the original Point Break. Thank you. Oh my God, I used to remember the director of the movie.
They're surfers.
James Cameron's ex-wife who did Hurt Locker.
Catherine Bigelow?
Catherine Bigelow. She directed Point Break. Yeah.
Did she really?
Yeah, she did. Yes.
Wow.
Movie number 4, I think, was the highest grossing movie of the year, is the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yes.
Which is actually pretty good.
Granted, yeah.
I went with my best friend and his then 6-year-old son. And man, we had a blast. It was so much fun. I feel like watching children's movies with kids just makes you appreciate them more.
I think I could watch that movie without kids, honestly. I mean, I saw it with kids, but like, if you take that one and Barbie and Oppenheimer, I think I've still seen Super Mario Brothers more times. It's the right length. It's funny. It's charming. Toad's great. There's a Donkey Kong race. I'm loving it.
You've inspired me. I'm probably going to fall asleep to that movie tonight. Number 5, Evil Dead Rise. I don't do spookies, so I skipped this one.
Look, for the Evil Dead peaked with Army of Darkness, right? Like, we can all agree with that. Like, Army of Darkness was like the mountain.
With the boomstick, yeah.
Yeah, and after that, like, everything else has just been kind of like trying to recapture that magic, put that originality. That's what I want.
Some other movies worth mentioning outside the top 5 are There, God, It's Me, Margaret. I actually really like that movie, even though I found it hard to relate to because I was never a 12-year-old girl. John Wick Chapter 4 was number 8.
The longest stunt sequence of all time on the steps.
Yeah.
They even get a shout out to it at the Oscars.
I'm pretty sure next. Did they do stunts for this year's Oscar?
No, this year's Oscar, they just gave a shout out to all the stunt people, but then showed a bunch of stars.
That's
doing
right.
Stunts.
Because they had Emily Blunt. They had Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling who are in a movie about a stuntman. So yes, that is what happened. But I feel like there is a stunt Oscar happening soon in the next couple of years. Like, I know next year they're doing best casting, where it's like the best group of people that, like best chemistry, basically. More movies, Dungeons and Dragons was number 12. Air, which I actually really liked, even though it's kind of gross because it's just about how cool this company was. Sisu, which if you guys haven't seen, it's about a Swedish dude at the end of World War II who finds a bunch of gold, and then a whole bunch of Nazis who are trying to escape the end of the Reich are like pushing into Sweden. And then they find this guy's gold and they think they can like restart it. And then it just becomes one of the bloodiest movies I've ever seen. And then number 19 for May 2023, Star Wars Return of the Jedi. It was re-released in theaters and made a cool $2.1 million.
Yeah, I saw it in the theaters again. I think that was now like my 6th time. I saw it 4 times originally, 1 time in the special edition re-release, and then I had to go see that. It's got Ewoks. Yub nub.
Yeah.
Except it doesn't have Yub Nub because it's the crap version of the movie, not the original.
That's right.
Really quickly, too, I want to talk about the top 50 comics. Now, normally my website for talking about this stuff is Comic-Con, but because this was after DC moved away from Diamond, none of their comic book information goes past 2021. So I had to go to a different source. I went to ICV2. .com, and they have their top 50 comics ranked for May 2023. Now, obviously, this doesn't include digital sales. I believe this is just physical. Number 1, Batman 135, which is well into like the Chip Zdarsky era of Batman.
All right.
Number 2, Amazing Spider-Man 25, the Zeb Wells Avengers relaunch under Jed MacKay, who's probably my favorite current Marvel writer.
Yes.
That was number 1. Amazing Spider-Man 26.
Oh, is that where Ms. Marvel dies, or no?
I believe that's right. Okay, that might actually be the Ms. Marvel death. Edge of Spider-Verse number 1 is number 5. Titans number 1 relaunch at DC. Extreme Venomverse number 1, which I bought but never read because I'm a bad comic book fan. Green Lantern number 1, that relaunch. Daredevil number 11 was number 9, and I think that was the end of the Chip Zdarsky run right before it was rebooted with Saladin Ahmed. Batman and the Joker, the Deadly Duo, 7-7. I didn't read that, but the fact that the 7th issue of a 7-issue miniseries placed in the top 10 according to this website, we should celebrate that. That's kind of special.
Yeah,
that's kind of neat. Good for them.
J.A., real quick, do you remember what you thought of Deadly Duo?
No. I don't.
We just read it like a couple months ago.
I know.
Yeah, I have it, but I haven't read it. But you guys didn't like it.
No, we didn't. I mean, Silvestri's art was wonderful, but like Joker zombies.
Oh, right. Yeah.
His art wasn't that good because Batman wasn't even wearing shorts. So.
Yeah, we said that.
He had the
with
weird
the pants
belt.
and no belt. Oh, that bothered us.
Starting at a B- right there. I'm sure it was a good series. There were very talented people working on it. DC was kind of in the middle of like not quite a reboot phase, but it was like, okay, we need to like refocus. We need to realign. Amanda Waller is now like the prime enemy of the DC universe. And so that's where we're starting with DC. Kind of an exciting time for comics. I got to be honest. I've started to fall so much more in love. I've been getting better about reading my monthlies the past few months just because I think the books are all so exciting. And May 2023 is around the time that started.
Very cool. Mikey, any last thoughts on those top 10? Any books that jump out at you before we go to commercial break?
No, well, no. I mean, I'm actually just reading all that stuff now. Like I haven't. Like I just finished reading Night Terrors. Like I just finished reading the whole. You know how I am with these events. I buy every single goddamn thing connected. Yeah. And as a whole, I quite enjoyed it. So like the Zdarsky Batmans, I paused because I like reading things. It's weird. I don't care for continuity, but if it's part of a long story, I will try to read it in order. It's really weird. Mm-hmm. So now I got to go back and do Gotham War and everything like that. But yeah, man, it's good stuff.
Well, thanks so much to George from Shortbox Summary for that awesome recap of movies and music and other comic books that were coming out at the same time as our review for this week. That is right. We'll be right back with that review of Unstoppable Doom Patrol by Dennis Culver and Chris Burnham right after these messages.
Hi, it's Carlo Calantuan, last Comic Shop podcast listener and comic book tragic here in the Philippines. Mabuhay! When I'm in the US, I'm always on the lookout for a good deal on boards, bags, boxes, and all other manner of comic book related supplies. And that's why I love to go to bcwsupplies.com and use the promo code LCSPOD to get 10% off of all my orders. Not only do I get a discount on everything I buy at BCW, but I'm able to support the podcast when I use LCSPOD at checkout. So if you're in need of comic book supplies, head over to bcwsupplies.com and use the promo code LCSPOD. Oh, and guys, I'm still waiting for that Tressie review. Come on, when is it?
When you're done listening to this podcast, check out mine. My name is Dave, and I'm the host of Beer in Front. My podcast is just enjoying the beer that's in front of you. Sometimes we forget about a classic beer while we focus on the new trendy thing. What I try to do each week is to enjoy an old school classic or have a beer that has potential to be a classic. I'll also talk about events of the day, I'll add my spin to things, and each week there are people that really annoy me, and I'll call them out as the jag-off of the week. That's Beer in Front, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time to go on patrol. That's right, the Doom Patrol this week. On The Last Comic Shop, we've got the Unstoppable Doom Patrol by the wonderful Dennis Culver, who, as Mikey pointed out earlier on the show, was a guest of ours. We interviewed him right before this series dropped last year, so make sure that you go check that interview out in the archives to hear his thoughts prior to the book being released. But now that it has been collected, all 7 issues, and a wonderful trade that you can pick up at your local comic book shop today, we thought that it was about time to actually review the entire series. So, J.A., who worked on The Unstoppable Doom Patrol with Dennis Culver?
Okay, so Dennis Culver had the writing duties on this with Chris Burnham as the artist. Brian Reber was the colorist. Pat Brousseau providing letters, and Ben Abernathy, the editor for the series.
Very good. Now, Mikey, you want to give us that 10-cent synopsis?
Yeah, it's real easy. The Doom Patrol, who are DC Comics' weirdest superhero team, and they have been since the 60s, has decided that they have a new mission in life and that they are out to X-Force things and protect those who have been given powers by the events of Lazarus World. In Lazarus World, there was a large volcanic explosion involving Lazarus pits, and it created mysterious green rain that did a whole George R.R. Martin wild cards thing and gave some people powers or changed other people's powers. So there's all of these new metahumans running about who are brand new, didn't have powers yesterday, have powers today, and the Doom Patrol has decided to round them up and protect them because nobody else will.
Yeah. I mean, it's very similar in some ways to what happened at Marvel several years back when they were trying to make fetch happen with the Inhumans. And they were like... and they were like, Terrigen mists everywhere. Everybody's Inhuman now. Because, like, again, that's how some things work at DC. You have these metagenes, right? Some people have metagenes, and they're activated by certain stressors or factors in the environment. In fact, they've now retconned, I think, the original Doom Patrol that Niles Calder activated their metagenes. And that's how... It's and the weirdest one was Robot Man. I don't know why they had to explain the
catastrophe theory. Was that what they called it?
Yeah,
it's something like that.
Like Glass in Untouchable or Unbreakable, excuse me. He is the architect of all of the disasters that created these characters. So yeah,
right. Rita Farr, it makes sense. Standard mutant powers, even Negative Man, somewhat. But Robot Man with like this is like a quasi like. Universal brain. I don't know. It was weird. It was weird.
I think the idea is that he wasn't much of a human until he wasn't much of a human. But like as a human, he was a dick. Now as a robot, he's finding his humanity.
Thank God for quantum brains and also really cool white and black leather jackets.
That's true.
Right.
He looked amazing in that book.
But, George, you mentioned before that you have never read any Doom Patrol up until this week. So let's get your initial thoughts on this Doom Patrol. Did it make you want to read more?
It sure did. I always kind of felt like do you guys remember that show Lost? Remember Desmond on that show Lost?
Yeah.
He was saving like that one Charles Dickens book. He's like, I want this to be the last book I read before I die. I'll see you in another life, brother.
That was very good. That was a good Desmond.
Thank you. I've always kind of felt that way about Doom Patrol because I always really struggle with Grant Morrison comics, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to other creators who have worked on Doom Patrol, but to me, just coming up when I did with comics, Grant Morrison and Doom Patrol kind of felt synonymous. I'm clearly too dumb to read this book right now based on my reading of other Grant Morrison books. I want to get smarter and then hopefully come at this book later and really appreciate it. And then I never did either get smarter or go back to try to read it. So I've been putting off Doom Patrol for a minute. And then I heard your interview with Dennis Culver on the show. And I was like, okay, like this sounds kind of cool. I think I should check this out. And then I did. And I think one of my big struggles with DC recently has been I feel like there's kind of a lack of editorial direction. But this book, tying into Lazarus Pit, tying into Amanda Waller being like the new primo baddie of the DC, it felt very early 2000s Marvel-ish, where it just felt like there was some direction. I read this book. I loved this book. I didn't know anything about these characters. I thought they were immediately accessible. And I thought the best part about this book was that it simultaneously felt like an ongoing and like an extremely tight 4-issue miniseries at the same time, where there was somehow time for characters to just run around and breathe and do all this weird stuff that I assume, respectfully, these weird characters like to do in their weird time, while also like sort of serving a greater editorial agenda. I thought the art was gorgeous. I thought everything read extremely clearly. I am a Doom Patrol fan because of this book. I've got some qualms with it that I can't wait to talk with the rest of you about later in this episode. But no, I think this book is a huge success, especially if you've never read these characters before, like me.
Well, speaking of another person that hasn't read a ton of Doom Patrol in the past, J.A. Scott, I know that when we interviewed Dennis Culver, you made a lot of, hey, are the Doom Patrol the DC's version of the X-Men? As a huge X-Men fan, did you feel like this book was kind of capitalizing on the X-Men, or do you feel like it was different enough that it was something else?
It has more of a New Mutants vibe than an X-Men vibe because they're all sort of young and don't know how to operate as a team very well, and their powers are sort of not really under control a lot. And you get this Professor X-y guy who's even in a wheelchair who is trying to control the scene, and then you've got the Scott Summers in the Chief who's like, no, I'm in control. No, you're not. Yes, you are. It's different enough that it didn't feel like just a bad pastiche of New Mutants or X-Men, but it was weird. The whole thing was very weird. It was enjoyable, but also I found myself struggling to care.
Yeah.
And maybe that says a bad thing about me. I don't know. It's like, I don't like the weird kids that are all monsters. Let them go off and be weird monsters elsewhere. I'm not invested. Also, I know that a lot of people like, what's his name, Mala, Monsieur Mala.
I love Monsieur Mala.
I don't get him at all. Is he a communist? Is he?
Yes.
Okay.
He's a gay Haitian gorilla who's in love with a brain in a jar.
But then he just stepped on the brain in the jar.
Right.
Well, they're going through stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going through.
Oh, okay. Apparently, I don't get him as a character at all.
Also, I don't want to be rude. I've listened to so many episodes of Last Comic Shop, and this is the first time I've ever disagreed with J.A. I'm like,
I don't care about kids with obvious disabilities.
Well,
That's
no, it's every time there's a new episode, I always put like $15 on J.A. like in Vegas. Like I'm like, oh, he's gonna have the best take of the episode.
Oh,
like, I bet you on the line every episode, and this is the first time I'm like, man, I lost money on J.A.
Well, I'm gonna double down on some of the stuff that J.A. said. This is not my favorite Doom Patrol at all.
No.
Again, I had high hopes going into this series. After the interview with Dennis Culver, I thought that this was gonna be a complete home run in terms of, and I'm not going to say that it wasn't a solid hit. There were some issues that I really did enjoy, but honestly, I really did fall in love with Gerard Way's Doom Patrol recently, right? Not only that, you had Nick Darrington on art. His art is on like an entirely different level, or just stuff that I really, really love. I felt like anything was going to kind of be a pale comparison. So maybe it's just the fact that it wasn't that Doom Patrol that I most recently read. I felt like it had too much stuff, too many characters, too many things going on, too many subplots running around, and not enough time to breathe. Initially, maybe it wasn't supposed to be 7 issues, and maybe he was setting up Chris Claremont type plot lines that were going to go for issues and issues and issues, and he was dropping things, and then he had to wrap it up. Maybe that was the case, but there was just too much. And trying to interconnect it to all of the various incarnations of the Doom Patrol that happened before, I thought was a real detriment, because I thought it lost focus in some issues. Mikey, though, I mean, I think you're on George's side. What were your thoughts?
Point of clarification, Doom Patrol came out 3 months before the X-Men did. Doom Patrol debuted in June of 1963. X-Men was September of 1963. So, and we all know Stan. Having read most of the Kupperberg run, a lot of the Golden Age stuff, all of the Grant Morrison stuff, all of the Rachel Pollack stuff, all of everything since then, John Arcudi, John Byrne, which I don't recommend. Gerard Way's run owes everything to the Pollack and Morrison runs, and he kind of dipped his feet with Umbrella Academy, writing basically the best Doom Patrol book that isn't a Doom Patrol book and all that stuff. So yeah, having read all of that stuff, it's not necessarily a favorite of mine. There are many runs that I prefer The Grant Morrison stuff I prefer, the Rachel Pollack stuff I prefer, but it's very surreal and very bonkers and very weird. Like George said, sometimes you feel like Grant Morrison's just kind of like trying to be the smartest guy in the room and nobody knows what the hell he's talking about a lot of time, but I love it. I love it anyway.
He's cooking on a different level than where it's just like, if you're hanging out with someone who's just like, oh, I can't match vibes with you.
Yeah.
That's how I feel the first time I read a Grant Morrison book. And then like, I need to like read it, not understand it, and then understand the mood I need to be in to reread it and then get like, oh, this is where I need to be to appreciate this book.
But this is a very, very accessible Doom Patrol book. It's like Gateway Doom Patrol. It's reader friendly. They're weird, but they're not surrealist weird. They mention all of key plot points that had come before, and it ties it up. They even, like, at the end of Gerard Way's run, Robot Man's a baby. They leave it at that, and they even mention that, like, you know, and Crazy Jane is involved. You know, they even mention Dorothy and Dorothy and the Candle Maker. So if you had watched just the TV show that you know, I think it was season 3 that had the Candle Maker in it, or whatever. Like, so it has all of these little elements mixed together, which is something I asked him about when we interviewed. Like, how much is it going to touch on that? Mixed together in sort of an accessible, beginner reader friendly storyline, which is what I think the whole Dawn of DC thing was. It was supposed to kind of make comics a little more comfy for people that are, you know, because I don't envy people who have to write comic books these days, because somebody's always pissed off about something. You know, they're always angry about some shit. No matter whatever creative, wonderful thing you do with a character, somebody's going to cry about it. That's why people have issues with Tom King, who I think is one of my favorite writers, because he does things with characters that people don't have the balls to do. Same thing with Morrison. So this was very safe and very friendly, but still had little inklings of that weird bonkers stuff going on. So I don't know, like, is it my favorite run? It's not my favorite run, but is it the one that I would necessarily hand somebody if they're like, I've never read Doom Patrol before, what should I read? I will say, read this first. If you like this, let's go do some peyote and read some Grant Morrison, because it's going to make your brain pour out of your nose.
Andy, I think you hit on something really critical about this book when you said too many characters. I don't think there's too many characters. I think there's too many villains, specifically, where you were dealing with Peacemaker, who was an extension of Amanda Waller, and then you were dealing with the billionaire guy, the head of Mutagen, whose name I can't remember, and I also think he's supposed to be a forgettable billionaire, so I don't feel that bad about it.
Elon Musk character, right?
Exactly, yeah. And then Immortus at the end, was that the
General Immortus.
He's old school.
On top of Monsieur Malat and
the Robot Brain, and then the Brotherhood of Evil.
Who I remember from like Infinite Crisis, but like I not my speed of comics, not the stuff I've internalized as a comic book fan over the years. Like, I feel like there was just too much going on, and I like Mikey, I think you're exactly right. I think they were trying to speak to every Doom Patrol fan, and I wonder if that's why, as my first Doom Patrol comic, I'm like, oh dang, this is like a really cool, like, I'm seeing a lot of cool stuff. This is like a survey of the history of Doom Patrol, and I wonder if it was more for me and less for you three who have more experience, or I guess you too, Jay. And
I didn't. And there were things that I generally enjoyed about it. I liked the stories that sort of were the one-offs, focused on going someplace and rescuing somebody. Like, they go to Gotham and Batman shows up and like, we don't need you, Batman. This is a rescue operation.
Oh, yeah.
Leave us alone. And Starbro, I love Starbro.
Starbro's
who
hilarious.
Was the starfish captured person that when the starfish thingy got on his face, the spore, I guess that's what it is, right? A starospore turned on his metagene, and then he became something different. He's no longer Starro, but he's also not a normal person. He's Starbro.
That was a really sweet moment where it's like, oh no, together we make sense. I thought, I literally cried everything. Like this, like I cry at commercials. You know, like I'm that jackass. That to me like really struck like an emotional chord. I'm just like, oh, that's beautiful, man. Like, I'm so happy for the two of them.
Well, I want to jump back in by saying I feel like there were issues that, to Jay's point, that I enjoyed more than other ones. I think my favorite issue was, honestly, I think issue 2, Peacemaker decided to get somebody to infiltrate the Doom Patrol, and like they sneak in and you see that kind of cool shot of like what they used to do in like Silver Age Marvel, where they would show you the base. I used to love like the base,
the weird worm. the weird worm was going through the air ducts and showing all the different. Yeah,
right.
That was really good.
And then you had Robot Man and you had Beast Girl, which I really did love. I really did love Beast Girl, honestly. I think she was a worthy addition to the Doom Patrol, in addition to Crazy Jane and Negative Man and Robot Man and Elastigirl. I didn't like the Degenerate.
You're not supposed to.
Well, it's not that I didn't like him because he's a character you're not supposed to like. I just don't feel like he was fleshed out at all, honestly. He was kind of a little bit of a throwaway character at times. I just don't feel like he needed to be in this. And that's where my idea of like too many characters, I feel like if you would have got rid of maybe one of these new team members and just focused on that, maybe it would have been. There's even that issue where they all go to the shrink, and I was just like, oh, this is kind of issue 87 of X Factor, where they all go to the shrink, and you hear about the Piotr Maximoff syndrome, and no, it ended up just being not as good, yo.
Oh, see, that's my favorite issue. That's my favorite issue of it. And David LaFuente drew that one as opposed to everything. He did the artwork on that one.
I was loving the art spreads on that. Mm-hmm. Like each character, when going through the shrink, they each got a 2-page spread, and I thought that was really well done from a artistic concept point of view.
Gave us some history, gave people some history on the characters, gave us their mindsets.
That was also a bet I placed with Vegas that would be someone's favorite issue. So just wanted to comment there, like I'm coming out ahead on this podcast to be.
Yes, we're predictable.
The art by Chris Burnham I thought was excellent. It really reminded me of Frank Quitely. Felt like there was like a lot of like excess details that it felt more like personal flourishes than necessary to the art, which is like how I kind of think of Frank Quitely, where like you can tell like a very auteuristically, like you can look at a Frank Quitely page and know it's a Frank Quitely page. And this, like, it felt Frank Quitely adjacent, but also different, which I really loved. But because of that, like, man, all I could think about was, do you guys remember in The Authority? Oh God, it was after Warren Ellis and Brian Hitch left. Then it was Mark Millar and Frank Quitely who took over. The Degenerate character felt like something out of that run of Authority to me, where it was like, hey, I'm going to be like a dick. I'm going to be a postmodern jackass and just be in your face. And like, I'm just going to have to do this really annoying thing to be powerful and be memorable. That was all I could think about when I was reading that character specifically. And so it felt a little out of place, I guess, like the more that I think about it. But at the same time, I don't think, as someone who's new to Doom Patrol, I didn't think that they overstayed their welcome. I thought they actually added kind of a nice element to the book because everyone else was so friendly. And so seeing Degenerate interact with them and like try to understand the world that they lived in, I actually thought I looked forward to the pages with Degenerate. Okay. As a newbie who has no history with these characters whatsoever.
All right, well, I mean, we've got a lot of thoughts here, but it's time to get to ratings, so we'll be right back with more of The Last Comic Shop right after these commercial breaks, with that as well as recommendations, so stay tuned for that.
Hello, friends. Do you like the 80s and Transformers? We are the Autopod Decepticast, and we started our podcast doing a minute-by-minute breakdown of the 1986 classic animated feature, Transformers the Movie. We've since moved on to an episode-by-episode review of the G1 series and just started Season 3. We have over 180 episodes, so if you're just discovering our show, there's plenty of gold to stuff into your ears, and it is very funny and fantastic. I'm not biased. We are on every podcast aggregator you could possibly stomach: Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and our web presence is autopoddecepticast.com. We are at APodDcast on Twitter and all of the things. Autopod Decepticast, friends, for all your animated Transformer needs.
LastComicShopPodcast.com is the destination for all things shop. Plan your week with upcoming show schedules, the latest books, recommendations, and chatter from the crew. Subscribe to the show on all major podcasting platforms from one convenient location. Show your support and browse the merch store. T-shirts, tanks, hoodies for the fam, coffee mugs, magnets, totes, and more. Check out exclusive content through the show's YouTube channel and follow the pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and others. All this and so much more at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com.
All right, Rec, before the Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for ratings. Yes, that time of every single show where we hope we don't doom you and your expectations of, again, what we might think of this book. And I don't know, whether we say, like, yeah, you should go pick it up, or maybe we scare you away. I don't know. I feel like we have such power sometimes, like with these ratings. Like, maybe we shouldn't rate these books, but I feel like that's what people are looking for, is like, did we think it was good or not? In any case, 1 out of 4 scale, and it comes from J.A. Scott. J.A., what is our rating scale for the Unstoppable Doom Patrol?
We're going to go 1 out of 4 monsters. Because they're monsters, they're not mutants. It's metagenes, It's not X genes.
Yes.
Totally different, you guys.
I will say this. Mikey was correct to point out that the Doom Patrol preceded the X-Men. But one thing it didn't precede was the Fantastic Four. And there are some folks that actually think that the Doom Patrol was actually DC's reaction to the Fantastic Four.
I always thought that was Challengers of the Unknown.
No. That would have been... It was kind of like Challengers came out, and then Fantastic Four was the reaction to that, and then Doom Patrol was the reaction.
Don't do that. No, my favorite urban legend that I've heard from documentaries that I've seen and in random YouTube BS. Don't take this away from me. It's that Stan Lee and someone from DC, Jerry Schwartz maybe, were like golfing one day. It was after the Justice League, and they're like, "Oh yeah, our new team book is actually doing really well. You should think about doing a team book." And then like the team book that Stan Lee came up with Jack Kirby was the Fantastic Four.
That's true.
Which like I love, because it's like, oh hey, he said team book. And then it wasn't the Avengers. Like, it wasn't like a carbon copy of the Justice League.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, here's 4 characters working together. It's so wildly different from the Justice League. I'm like, no, don't rob this urban legend from me.
And you're true. It is very true. It's actually, just to clarify, it wasn't Stan Lee playing golf. It was Martin Goodwin, who was the publisher of Marvel at that time. Stan Lee was his nephew, I think, right? Okay. And so he was like, Stan, you get out there and make some of them team books. Everybody likes those team books.
Just dudes being dudes, talking BS at the range. That's great.
Yeah.
Good
Stan
for them.
was about to quit comics at that time. And then he came, he's like, I'll write the comics I want to write. And he wrote the Fantastic Four. Regardless, the reason why I'm bringing up the Fantastic Four with my Doom Patrol is because I'm going to go first with my rating. And I'm going to give this about a 2.75. It is pretty good for a Doom Patrol book. Not some of my favorite Doom Patrol. I do really like the Grant Morrison Doom Patrol. I really, really like the Gerard Way's Doom Patrol. I don't even mind the Paul Kupperberg stuff. That is Eric Larson drawing some of those issues, which is kind of cool. And I feel like, again, to my points earlier, the Doom Patrol works when it's a smaller team. I feel Robot Man is always the anchor. He's the Ben Grimm, the Thing of the Doom Patrol, the guy that's the heart and the soul, and the guy that's really there to help punch the bad guys. And you got Crazy Jane, who I just love their OTP. That's my favorite part of the Doom Patrol. And then Negative Man's always wonderful, and I'm glad that Elastigirl's back on the group. And I don't even mind Beast Girl because, again, she harkens back to Beast Boy. But that should have been the team, man. And I don't want to say like that Dennis Culver couldn't have come up with new ideas and things. After a while, there was a lot of stuff going on here, too much stuff, and I wish that he would have just pared it down a little bit and just given us a little bit more interactions with those characters that we know, because some of the characterizations were really good. Like, I love issue 3 with Robot Man and Negative Man driving around that car together, and like Beast Girl's in the back seat. That was great. That was that family dynamic that I was looking for out of the Doom Patrol, and there wasn't enough of that, I felt, at times. So it's a 2.75. It's almost really, really good, but it just falls flat a little bit for me. Mikey.
I think it's a 3 for me. Like, I quite enjoyed it. I think it's super friendly. I think it's accessible. And a little wacky. I like seeing Doom Patrol's place in this world and where they are. I'd like to see more of it. It's not my favorite run, but if I had to choose a top, I would probably place it above the Kupperberg stuff, which is just sort of your standard superhero thing, but below the ones that came before it. So yeah, it's good.
All right. J.A., you're up next.
Yeah, I think I have to give it a 3 too. The issues that I liked, I really liked those sort of one-issue story arcs, going out and rescuing a monster in Gotham and not bothering to tell Batman that you were going into Gotham because you're on a rescue mission and who cares. Aforementioned Green Lanterns issue 3, the issue that was all about going into therapy, and you see each character sort of on the 2-page spread have their history and what they're working through from a therapeutic perspective gone over. The problems I had with it is having trouble connecting with the characters, and then sort of so many of them and all that plot going on the last 2 issues, that felt like we would sort of going on issue to issue, Monster of the Week to Monster of the Week with a little bit of ongoing story sprinkled in. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, now it's full on. And suddenly we went from minor little things to a massive war to the end of the world. And I struggled with sort of how they went to 11 very, very quickly. Maybe you either extend that some more or you just write it in a different way. I don't know. I did find it quite accessible, though, as someone who hadn't read Doom Patrol before. And, I would recommend it to someone who's interested in getting into Doom Patrol. From what Mikey and you said, it sounds like it's a nice opener to the universe. I just, I, for one, don't know if I would be interested after having this opener to read more. I struggled to connect to the Doom Patrol, and that probably says more about me than anything else. I see George shaking his head and muttering because he's lost a lot of money on me.
All right, George. Yeah, bring us home here.
I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 4, strictly because I started reading comics as like a child where I was just picking up random issues where I thought the covers looked cool. But I started going to the shop every week when I was 13, 14. That was when I like decided to be a comic book fan and just like learn what the hell was going on. I had access to the early internet and just remember like typing into Google one night, like what comics are worth reading, and like Doom Patrol popped up. And so Doom Patrol, I tried it in the past. I couldn't get into it. It always felt like this big totemic thing to me where it was just like, this is a boss fight in a video game, basically, where like you need to cross this to become an actual comic book fan. Like you can't earn your stars unless you have an opinion on this book. And I just couldn't get into that book, man. Like I've tried over the years and I just couldn't do it. And like, I hope this summer I will be ready to actually tackle it again, because this book makes me want to tackle it again. So I'm giving it 3.5 because I think this book made me care about Doom Patrol in a way that none of the other books from Doom Patrol I've tried to read actually have. I think this is a perfect jumping on point, and I think it makes you ask more questions by the end. I do think it suffers not from too many characters, but specifically from too many villains, where there was so much going on, where it felt like there was an editorial mandate to make Peacemaker, who is an agent of Amanda Waller, who is like the new big bad in the DC universe, to make them seem important and sort of run the tables. And then all of a sudden it switches to a character from the past who's been lurking in like the last couple panels of each issue, and then all of a sudden became a Doom Patrol book. Like that I actually think is the weakness of the book, just because I don't have that context. And it sounds like other people who are more experienced with Doom Patrol found that underwhelming. So like maybe they shouldn't have done that at all. The way I said earlier that like this felt like the cross between a 4-issue miniseries and an ongoing. It was originally supposed to be 6 issues, and then they added an extra issue. I don't know if that was art delays from Chris Burnham or script delays from Dennis Culver, but the fact that like we got that David LaFuente art, that book was when it became a 7-issue miniseries. And it seems like they've got more story to tell, and this book makes me care about that. It makes me care in a way that the existing material never made me care.
Very cool. And we're hoping that a lot of our books in our recommendations section will also make you care about, I don't know, some characters that maybe you've passed over before. Again, these are books that you can find at your local comic book shop in addition to the Unstoppable Doom Patrol, whether you find that in single issues or in that new trade paperback that came out this week. So all collected together. If you want to just grab it, read it, here this springtime. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and start off with Mikey Wood because I feel like he has some more Doom Patrol to throw out to our fans.
I do. Yeah, my recommendation is it's the Rachel Pollack Doom Patrol Omnibus. So Rachel Pollack was a World Fantasy Award-winning author who was tasked with taking over the book after Grant Morrison left in his epic 80-something. I can't remember how many issues he wrote. Gigantic. His omnibus is like twice as thick as this one. And it's a groundbreaking book for a number of reasons, because it successfully follows what Grant Morrison did. It's rather underrated because of the hype of the Grant Morrison stuff. It's like every Swamp Thing done after Alan Moore. All good stuff. There's never been a bad run of Swamp Thing, but everybody focuses on Alan Moore. So this is high quality. She just recently passed away in 2023. She was a trans creator. This run is important because it has the first trans character of either of the big two in a character named Coagula who comes in. These were the first issues that were printed under a Vertigo banner. Vertigo didn't exist when Grant Morrison was on the book. There's artwork by Richard Case, who continues from the Grant Morrison thing, and eventually Ted McKeever, who I really dig, comes in towards the tail end. And it's just really good, surrealist a lot of times, wacky fun with this band of misfits. So I recommend the Morrison thing, but please move on and read this as well. So.
All right, J.A., you've got, I think, instead of an omnibus, a single issue for us this week?
Yes, I'm going with a single issue now. It is double size because it's an annual, and this is back when Marvel used to do annuals, and they weren't part of a whole story in itself. This is not the Atlantis Attacks annual.
Evolutionary War. Yeah.
Yes. This is a standalone story with a beautiful cover by Bill Sienkiewicz. The New Mutants Annual #1 from 1984. Steal This Planet, a rock fable. This is the story of Cannonball falling in love and meeting, I think, his future wife. I want to say it's his future wife in Lila Cheney, who turns out to not just be, like the Joan Jett of rock stars, but a mutant who can teleport. And so it ends up being the New Mutants kids get teleported by Lila Cheney into the cosmos and help her fight these bad guys, and there's a Dyson sphere, and it's you get the sort of teenagers out of place, and then they at the end they transport back, and they're like, we're in London. How are we supposed to get to New York? And Lila Cheney's like, sorry, my powers don't work on such small areas. I can only transport across galaxies. So it's great. It's Chris Claremont at his best. Back when Marvel annuals were sort of a chance for the writer to tell a fun story that didn't necessarily have to worry about the continuity. And for a Chris Claremont story, it's a very nice one-off. Usually you read Chris Claremont and you've got to read like 30 issues or 50 issues or 250 issues to get the story that he's laying down. But this is a nice little self-contained tale.
There you go. And speaking of teenage superheroes, as well as Doom Patrol connections, my recommendation this week comes from a wonderful collection of DC reprints that Eagle Moss came out with a couple years ago. And I was fortunate enough several years back during the peak of COVID that a website was selling all of these for like rock bottom prices. So I ended up getting like 20 or 25 volumes of this awesome Eagle Moss collection reprint. This one in particular that I'm talking about is Teen Titans, The Birth of the Titans, which includes not only DC Comics Presents 26, but as well as new Teen Titans 1 through 6, all done by the wonderful Marv Wolfman with the art by the late, great George Perez. And this is really, again, the book that went toe-to-toe with Claremont and Burns' X-Men in terms of popularity. That great team of Robin, Starfire, Wonder Girl, Raven, Kid Flash, Beast Boy, Cyborg. That wonderful stories where you get the first appearance of Slade That's right, Deathstroke the Terminator, as well as Trigon. You get the Fearsome Five, who make their first appearance as a team to fight against the Titans. You get that giant weird tower that looks like a T, which I never understood. Like, it's just kind of a goofy-looking building. Like, who would make a building that looks like a T? But it works. It works. And so whether you read these particular issues in this particular collection, or maybe you get the omnibus, or if you can find some of the single issues, they're pretty pricey nowadays. But these are all wonderful, wonderful stories. I just particularly like this Eagle Moss collection because with all of the Eagle Moss collections, they would throw in a bonus story. And the bonus story that's thrown into this particular volume is Doom Patrol 99. Which was originally published in November of 1965, and it includes the first appearance of Beast Boy. That's right, Beast Boy was a member of the Doom Patrol first and foremost. In fact, Rita Farr, Elastigirl, was his adopted mother, as well as Mentos, the Fresh Maker.
That's right.
We didn't talk about him. He's in a tank in the Unstoppable Doom Patrol, but he was the adopted father of Beast Boy for a couple issues. And so, often the forgotten member of the Doom Patrol in Minto. So.
I'm looking at that book now, Eagle Moss. Is that like the European printer?
Yeah, absolutely. These came from, I think, England, and it was very similar to those like mini statues in which like you got kind of like a subscription and they sent you a volume every single month. Again, during COVID, I managed to pick up each of these volumes for like $4 a piece. And so I got this and Birthright and Legends and the Invasion storyline and there's lots.
Are they kind of like when you buy Blu-rays, but they're the English Blu-rays, so you get them for a lot cheaper than if you would buy them in America, but you can't play them unless you have a Blu-ray player that plays all regions. So you have to. Do you have special glasses for those all region? Yeah, all region glasses.
It has the really dumb, like not PG-13, but like Peggy 8 or whatever. Like rating on it.
Well, they're also nice if you can find them because they have a couple pages at the beginning that give you the entire history behind the particular books, as well as a story so far page, which kind of brings you up to date as to what was happening prior to this particular volume. So
and don't they have a connecting spine art too?
Yes, they do. They do. Now, again, they're wonderful books.
And what size are they in comparison? Because
regular comics, they're the size of a regular comic.
They're standard trade paperback size, but they're just in a nice hardback edition version, and they look wonderful on your bookshelf if you can get the spines. But in any case, George, why don't you bring us home with your recommendation this week?
Really quick, I just want to say the last episode I was on was us talking about Fantastic Four, the current Marvel series, and you recommended the She-Hulk book.
Yeah.
At the end of that, I read all 20 issues that are out for that, man, going back to 2022. Man, that book's really good. Shout out to Raul. Shout out to Roj Antonio, Maresca, Gina Lett, Miyazawa. Everyone who's contributed to that book. The Jen Bartel covers are astonishing. Really good book. So that's a pseudo double recommendation. But I want to recommend Moon Knight, man. Like I talked about Jed MacKay earlier, saying that he's my favorite current writer at Marvel with penciler Alessandro Capuccio. The two of them, this is going to sound annoying, so bear with me. They just sort of like soft rebooted Moon Knight as a new series called Vengeance of the Moon Knight. There was a 30-issue series that took place starting back in 2021. That is that team dealing with Mark Spector. But it really reminded me of this run just because they were talking about themes of found family. They were talking about a mission that seemingly came out of nowhere. They created a bunch of new characters. Like there was just a lot of parallels between this Doom Patrol story. This is actually a really good transitory book for people who either liked or didn't like Doom Patrol. I think that this book picks up a lot of pieces. It's also an ongoing, like I said, it lasted for 30 issues and then is a soft reboot into a new direction with this current series by the same creative team. It's so good, man. Like Marvel's cooking right now. I'm loving this. I'm loving Ghost Rider. I'm loving so much that's happening in Marvel right now. But Moon Knight has floated to the top of my pull list every month. So I cannot recommend this book enough.
Very cool. And we hope that we float to the top of your podcast pile every single week. That's right, The Last Comic Shop, every single week here in 2024 and beyond. We're already thinking about 2025 as we continue well into this year. I mean, we're going to have our 200th episode later this year. So you want to make sure that you're reviewing, and subscribing over at www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com so you never miss any of our wonderful episodes. We've got movie mayhem right around the corner, not only reading some wonderful comics, but also the movies that inspired them, whether it was Batman 89, whether it's Golgo 13, which we're doing this year, whether it's The Crow, which, again, I think they just started talking about a new Crow reboot. I was seeing some pictures with that. So, yeah, we'll be watching the original Brandon Lee Crow as well as reading that during Movie May. So, yeah, make sure that you're checking us out every single week.
I know as a fellow podcaster, I should be offended, but like I got to be honest, I like your show so much more than I like my show. You guys are so much more casual, where I feel like such a nerd whenever I copy whenever I do my stuff, I'm like, what if they didn't read the issue? I should like really summarize. I'm like, okay, this is tedious. Let me like read like a 1,200 word summary of this book just in case they didn't read it so they understand the conversation that's about to happen. You guys just figured it out. You guys just made like a really fun show. Yeah, this should be top of your pod list. Listen to Last Comic Shop #1, and then maybe find 2 other podcasts to listen to, and then listen to Short Box Summary. I swear to God, like that like I should be supplemental. This should be primary education for you when you're listening to podcasts, when you're interested in comics. Listen to Last Comic Shop first, please.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, George. Kind of hard to follow that, but JA's got to with our merch store. So what we got there this week?
Well, I don't know. Things to shrink your head so you can fit through doors, I guess. But honestly, t-shirts, tote bags, coffee mugs, this week only, a special suit that keeps your mutant metagenes contained so you don't turn into that superwoman thing that just metastasized into a
Meta Woman. Put some respect on her name. Her name was Meta Woman.
Meta Woman? All right.
Yes. Wow.
And don't forget to go to comic shops where you can buy all the stuff that we talked about tonight that Chad usually writes down, and I did not. New Mutants Annual #1, which I love and own, and the Vengeance of the Moon Knight series, and the thing that Andrew said, and
the Teen Titans. You love the Teen Titans.
I have every individual issue.
You don't. You don't have issue 2.
I have a reprint.
As a facsimile.
That's right. I'm sorry. I have a cheap copy of the.
See, this is the shit I normally do on my podcast, and that's where I feel like I lose people.
That's right. If I find it for a decent amount, I'm not going to pay $100+ for fucking Deathstroke. But anyway. Go to a comic shop because they need you, and that's where you can buy all this stuff, and it's wonderful, and digital books are for suckers.
Sorry, after that last exchange, I lied. Our podcasts are the exact same. You should listen to Short Box Summary at the same time as you listen to Last
You really should. It's a wonderful show.
You should.
We're all raging nerds.
Time in your day, load up the Last Comic Shop, load up the Short Box Summary, make a small playlist, listen to those 2 shows, you're golden. You are golden. And until next week, when we hope that you're golden by listening to more episodes, I was the host with the most, Danny Larson. I was joined by J.A. Scott, as well as Mikey Wood and George from the wonderful Short Box Summary. And we hope that you stay safe, stay doomish. I think I used that one before when I was talking about the Fantastic Four, and I still don't know what that word means. But it's cool. And remember, if you want to circumcise a hillbilly, just kick his sister in the teeth.
Oh my God in heaven.
You can take the guy out of Pennsyltucky, but you can't take the Pennsyltucky out of the guy.
The Last Comic Shop podcast was a 2024 Black Angus production.